So now we got this custom component, but we got another custom component which I want to build. And this component should hold the input related markup and logic. Now definitely feel free to extract the appropriate code from app.js into goal-input.js on your own and build your own goal-input component which you use in app.js. In a couple of seconds, which I give you to pause the video, we will do this together. So, did you succeed? Let's try this together. Now here I want to extract some markup into goal input. For this, I'll first of all create a goal input component here in the goal input.js file and export this. And then we want to return some JSX code in here. The JSX code that should be returned is the text input and the button, but I will also grab the view that holds these elements as the container, because that view holds the input related container styling and I want to outsource this as well. So here I will add this container with the text input and the button to my goal input.js file. Now, just as before, we need to do a couple of things. We need to import view, text input, and button, and we need to bring over our style sheet objects. Now I'll start by importing, and I will import view, text input, and button from React Native so that we can use these components here. And I will also import style sheet because, of course, I will create a style sheet. I will create such a styles object here with style sheet create so that we can set up the styles that belong to this component in this component file. And in our case, that would be the input container and the text input styles. So in app.js, here I will grab the input container and text input style objects and cut them so that our style definitions in app.js are now much leaner. And I will move them over into the goal input component file. So here in this object, I'll now paste them in, and that makes sure our styles are there. But now we're not done. We also are handling some state here. We're getting the user input and we're interacting with the main course goals state with help of this button. But now the problem, of course, is that the course goals state is managed in the app component, whereas the inputs are in a different component. But that's a common problem in React apps and not specific to React Native, and we can solve it as we solve it in all React apps. We can also talk to the parent component by passing event handler functions via props. So here, for example, we can accept props on goal input and expect a special prop, which could be named onAddGoal, to be provided by the parent component, which actually holds a function as a value that will be executed upon a press. So now in the app component, we can use the goal input component we just added. We can import goal input from /components goal input. And we can use this component here in that place where we had all the input related markup before and set this onAddGoal prop, which we expect to get here in our goal input component. And now since we set this prop's value as a value for the onPress prop, and that prop wants a function to be executed, we should pass a function to onAddGoal in the app component. And we still pass our addGoal handler here, just like this. Now what does change though is how we handle the user input, how we fetch the user input. Because this goal input handler and the state that manages the entered input is in the wrong place now. We don't do this in the app component anymore because the text input element is in the goal input component. What we should do therefore is grab that state and cut it from the app component and move it into the goal input component, like this. For this, of course, we must make sure that we import useState from React in this goal input component so that we can use this function here. Now we got the state. We also need this goal input handler function which updates the state though. So that in the app component, only the course goals state and the add goal handler function is left. We will tweak this function in a second as well though. In goal input.js, we can now paste in that goal input handler function. And therefore this is now again connected to onChangeText where we point at this function. So this entered goal text is still being handled here. Now the only problem is that this entered goal text is eventually needed in the app component when we add a new goal. And therefore we also need to make sure that this data arrives here in add goal handler. The easiest way of ensuring this would be to expect the entered goal text as a parameter. So that whenever add goal handler is called, we get this text and we can use it in here. Now this function is fine. But right now, this text wouldn't be provided. Add goal handler is passed as a value to onAddGoal on the goal input. And onAddGoal is forwarded to onPress. And onPress, which ultimately calls this function, does not provide this entered goal text. To make sure that it does, we have to change something in our code here. For example, we can add another function here in our goal input component file and name this function addGoalHandler again. So now we have this function or a function with this name in both goal input and app, but that's no problem because we're in different components here, hence we have no name clash. Now in this function, I actually want to execute props onAddGoal. So I want to call this onAddGoal function, which we receive here, manually. And then onPress is connected to this addGoalHandler function, which I just added. By calling this function manually, I can now make sure that I forward my entered goal text. So this state. I pass this as a value to the function I receive on this onAddGoal prop. And therefore, since that function is the addGoalHandler in the app component, that addGoalHandler function will receive the entered goal text, because I'm passing it manually here. And again, this is nothing React Native specific, this is standard React. Now, as an extra bonus, we could also set our entered goal text to an empty string to clear it whenever we added a new goal. We didn't do that before, but we can do it now, and I think it is a change that makes sense. But of course, it's up to you whether you want to do that or not. Here, I will do it by setting the state back to an empty string. With all of that, back in app component, this should all work. We can now get rid of some unused imports again, which we don't need anymore. And if we now save everything and reload the app on both devices, if I now learn React Native, this goal still gets added. Now what's not happening is that the input would be reset though. Actually, internally it is. If I click add goal, you see there was no text, but it's not reflected here in the input element. The reason for that is that I'm resetting the state here in goal input, but I'm not binding the state to text input. We don't have any proper two-way binding here. We just have one-way binding. In the past, this didn't matter because we never changed the text besides typing into the text input field. But now, since we're also changing the state here, like this by resetting it, we should add a value prop to text input and bind this to the entered goal text. So that whenever this goal text changes, because we, for example, reset it, this is reflected in the text input. If we now save this and reload everything, I can again learn React Native. Now it's reset, and I can add my goals. So this is now working, and now we split this into multiple components. And in the end, as you see, here we had absolutely nothing React Native specific. Splitting our app and passing data and functions around, that all works just as you know it from React.